Hello, and welcome to What Moves Us, the podcast where we ask, what moves us? Or more accurately, what's going to move us in future?
We look at debates, themes, and decisions of the minute that will impact on the way we get about in the future. Hi, Liam.
Hi, Johannah, how are you doing?
I'm okay, and welcome back to What Moves Us.
Are you being moved?
I'm always being moved. moving around the country this week because I'm in the big smoke.
The English big smoke or the Scottish one?
The English big smoke, although there is lots of stuff going on in Glasgow this week, which I didn't go to because I had to come down to London.
Right. This week is, you probably hear that I'm also in a convention centre as well. This week is quite busy of events. I did not get to Manchester, where Interchange was happening. I am instead at the Transport Ticketing Global event in Olympia in London. If I turn my screen around, you can see a little. I know the listeners can't.
You should,
There's no point me really describing it. It's a trade hall. So,
maybe we should start uploading on YouTube so the lovely listeners can see our.
yeah, and people to see that I'm wearing a suit today, which is even an upgrade than going to a drinks reception later
And where is your drinks reception?
at the residence of the Finnish ambassador in Kensington. I
And
take that.
is there a theme to the
Yeah,
drinks?
smart mobility.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
us mobility people get everywhere.
Well, have fun and look forward to hearing all about it in the pod next week.
So, what are we talking about today?
So, well, last week we discussed the government consultation. So this week we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but actually about how we can all take positive action and how we can respond to the consultation.
Brill. So, for anyone who has not listened to last week's episode or who doesn't want to necessarily commit the time to, can you give us a very quick summary of what we talked about last week?
No, I don't remember what I did last week.
We talked about.
I'm on this week. I'm like, it was even a different month.
We talked about the consultation that came out about the regulation of Great British Railways and whether it should be independent or not, and how that would impact open access operators, whether there's any scope for innovation or change in the future. And we had our own thoughts, which are in last week's pod, but this week we're going to discuss the actual detailed responses.
So, the consultation itself's got 20 questions, covering all sorts of topics around governance, accessibility, the industry structure. But what we did discuss last week was that there wasn't much on innovation. So I think what's quite interesting about that, given that we're called the Rail Innovation Group, is why would we respond to this if there isn't anything on innovation?
Well, I think we respond to, in my own thoughts, we need to respond to make sure that we raise the ability for the commercial structure to adapt for innovations in future.
Absolutely right. So I think that is really, I mean, like the crux of all government consultations is because I think quite often people think, well, what's the point? My voice isn't heard, it's not important and that. But actually, responding to consultations is really important because if something is missing and we respond to it and point it out that we think something should be included or that then we can make a difference. Because particularly from our point of view, from a startup point of view or an SME, we're always saying that there's barriers put in front of innovation in rail, that we can't get to speak to the right people, that the procurement process aren't the right ones, the supply chain is the right ones. Well, this is our opportunity to shape that future and to maybe make something better. What do you think?
Yes, I agree. And also linking it back to the theme, if this is episode 2 of How to Be a Startup in Rail, you need to make sure that you still can be a startup in rail based on how the government is going to implement the structures for the new Great British Rails.
Do you think innovation is at risk because of, the consultation and the processes that we're going through at the moment?
Um, uh, well, given that my definition of innovation is probably a little different to most other people's, I think I don't see anything here that's at risk. I think that keeping the commercial structures to continually be calling for better, newer products and new ideas will protect innovation from coming through. I don't necessarily think we need to have dedicated words of innovation for innovation's sake. I think we want a efficient operation and a nice passenger service. And to achieve that, if you just keep it under continual review and upgrading and modernizing, then that will bring in new ideas and new products.
So, yeah, so that's right, but do you think that will happen under, I mean, 'cause it's kind of going a bit off topic, I guess, from responding to the consultation, but I guess one of the things I was thinking about is because not a lot was put in the consultation, and not a lot is being said about GBRX, which is meant to be the innovation arm of GBR.
Yes.
So that kind of goes against the grain of what you're saying. So do we think that under something that isn't being said yet, that innovation is going to become a centralized thing in Derby, and the individual zones or networks or regions aren't going to be able to innovate themselves?
Yeah, I can see that risk if you have a centralized, you can't see me doing my air quotes, innovation department, then if there is a grad for things that are disruptive, that have to go through a centralized system rather than local areas buying their own products that they think are better. Yes, I imagine there's a tension and I imagine it will continually be in flux and a bit of a balance in future. But that could be healthy if you have people in the center doing what's it called? Role modeling case studies of new products that could be integrated into the rest of the network. Yeah, I don't know.
Now, I'm pleased that you
Continual
kind of
churn.
I'm pleased that you kind of mentioned products and case studies and things, because I wanted to get on to our response and that. But before we do, I just wanted to sort of like, highlight, maybe some of the questions that our members and listeners might want to respond to, and maybe some of the start to think about how we can formulate a response and that. But so the first question, and I highlighted this one because we talked a lot about it last week about incentives for GBR.
Yes.
And I was wondering, what your ideas were, and maybe, say our members and listeners want to engage with us in terms of what those incentives and measures should be, in the new GBR. How do we incentivize the railway to innovate? That isn't just within this centralized, you will do this or you will do that. How do we act within the grassroots that we act in?
Whoa, well, that's a very wide topic. Well, normally you'd say competition, and so we spoke last week about the need for o- private operators in this. There is a space for private operators in this new system, and that would be the competition to offering better services. Given that although there'll obviously be revenue, but if it sits in the public sector, then there's no ultimate commercial shareholder wanting more return for their investment. It relies then on politicians advocating for and calling for better outcomes from the public sector side, basically the voters. So I guess the incentive, I guess more transparency between what the organization is doing and what the passengers are receiving is the best way to incentivize improvements in investment in passenger facilities or infrastructure, because then passengers will know and can then hold to account the people making decisions about investment.
But how do we do that? Because what's really interesting, because innovation is very structured within the rail industry and very ad hoc. So how do we make sure in the future that we do allow that grassroots? So one of the things that I'm thinking of particularly is that I'm thinking about the way Innovate UK partner with various government departments based on the challenges, but they're highly competitive. And how do we know that they're driving the right innovations and incentives? Is there a better way we could do it under this opportunity?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you got me thinking there now. Um, yes, but you'd have, yes, but then you have to, yes, but someone needs to decide what better outcome means and what is the metric that you're trying to achieve in the better outcome. Do you want innovation for the sake of making operations cheaper and then you can score that? Or do you want innovation for the sake of it's a good idea to keep trying new products and therefore you can just measure it based on the number of new products? But I don't think there's currently a
No.
score of, I mean, you could do the wider economic impact of each innovation you bring in, where it's made and who invented it and what it saves.
It's interesting, it's that quality over quantity, and surely it's got to be quality, hasn't it? It's not, as you say, it's not just innovation for innovation's sake. It's about it, and I think it's quite interesting within rail, and many conversations over this over the years, and that is sort of, we shouldn't really be doing anything that isn't going to benefit the end user. And I very much sort of like say the end user, because I mean sort of like whether it be something that's going to make the job better for the member of staff, or whether it's something that's about the passenger. And we shouldn't really be doing anything that doesn't benefit that user, really. So it shouldn't really be about quantity, and it shouldn't, but we're always losing sight of the fact that we're designing for people, for users, because it might be a widget that makes the track run better, but it's still for the end user, isn't it? And we lose sight of that. And we talk, there's been lots of talk about putting the passenger first, but I don't think that's in the document. But what does that actually mean? And how do we actually really incentivize people to put the passenger first and to do innovation that is all about putting the passenger first?
Yes. I was going to say that you can set a score. I do remember you filling out a enormous, great appraisal work stream of wider impacts of a project, which allowed you to end up with a score of the wider impacts. If you remember this for South Yorkshire,
Yes.
and you put somewhere in Yorkshire. I'm not sure if it's South Yorkshire, but you could probably
I think it was West Yorkshire, and that was all. I mean, that was all about. That was a wide range of benefits, wasn't it? It wasn't just sort of like user. It was impacts on society, economy. I mean, like, it was a huge spreadsheet.
But that's how you would have to score these things because they're in the public sector. So
Mm.
there isn't a norm a financial. It's not just financial. It's also got to be societal impacts as public sector.
That's a good idea, though, isn't it? Interested
So
to hear what other people think about that.
would you want a startup to have to fill out that spreadsheet for every single project?
But I don't think it's necessarily for the startups to do, is it? Is it for the operators to do, to see the benefits that they want to get from an output or an
Well,
outcome?
I don't know. That sounds like something you should put in a consultation.
I know. What do our listeners think? Yeah, and I think the next question that I've kind of focused on a bit, which I think is really bizarre, is should the Secretary of State set the long-term strategy? I mean, would that be a yes or a no?
Um, I don't know how. I mean, this consultation is coming out under the guise of the Secretary of State. So the fact that there's a consultation about the structure seems like the Secretary of State is already asking whether you agree with the way that they're putting forward the structure.
That's why I think it's a bit of a bizarre question. But
Yes.
I think it's another one where we, startups, Rail Innovation Group can influence and put forward our ideas on what should be in that long-term strategy and how we make sure that innovation does get put forward and good innovation.
Yes. Yeah. I think the thing is that you're never going to get a politician to not influence what the organization is doing, but they usually do things into much shorter term, responding to a particular problem. I don't know, there's loads and loads of delays on the West Coast. So the Secretary of State makes a statement, say they're going to have some sort of working group to improve it, but they're quite short term outcomes. And when you go to the long term ones, well, yeah, kind of, because a long term strategy will involve a lot of money being spent, and therefore they're going to have to advocate for that money from the Treasury.
I guess you can have a long-term strategy but with short-term tactics. And I think that's the thing of that is you've got to be clear on what do you mean by a strategy, because strategy should be about vision and mission and what you want to achieve and outcomes. Whereas some of the things to get there are actually tactics. They're individual objectives or, they're individual things that help you get to the strategy. Because I think strategies by their very nature have to kind of be long term. And I don't mean in terms of definition, because you could take something very simple and it could only be 12 weeks, but it's still a strategy to get you somewhere at the end of 12 weeks. But you need a whole load of different elements that help you get to the end of that 12-week period. But I've forgotten what I was going to say when you said something about the strategy and stuff like that, which I thought was really it was about the short-termism and I guess to a certain extent the short-termism of governments and that, because actually startups can work really well in this space, and governments should use startups and SMEs to work in this space because of the fact that we can work with agility
Yes, and they
and
can get
we
the
can
returns
solve.
quicker.
Precisely. So really, this should be a big opportunity to actually to say to ministers, we can help you in this space and get you there quicker. You can have your long-term strategy, but we can help you with the tactics and the outcomes that you need to sort of like make them look good. And that's
I
something that
agree.
so a topic that we've tried to do and apt that you are at the ticketing conference this week is about
Yes.
the retail market and about GBR managing ticketing and what the future of that looks like. So has there been any discussions at the conference on that this week?
It has. A lot of the discussion, well, I mean, a lot of discussion that I have gone to listen to various people speak is focused on integrating across modes rather than just rail. So that's an interesting point, which if you're going to have GBR managing uh, the ticketing system or the retail market, is how are they interacting with the other modes who have to either buy access to the rail system, or is GBR going to manage the retail environment for ferries and for trams? Because they've got to talk to each other. So whatever GBR builds has to be able to talk, be interoperable with the other modes if
Because
you
of
really want
course,
integrated ticketing.
but of course, there are many countries that have integrated ticketing and don't make it nearly as complex as we have. I mean, like, question, should in the future GVR be involved in ticketing? Um, is it something that they should do as a core activity, or actually should they just be setting the products and let third-party retailers get on with it, or open access retailers get on it with it?
Um, I think that would remove one of the mitigating factors, even as weird as our ticketing is, the fact that the industry itself has to then be able to communicate what the product is and sell it to people does hold them somewhat accountable and grounded to reality. We talk about the 56 million fares. The rail industry has to, the current retail from National Rail and Cox have to be able to offer all of those fares. And so they're suffering their own Byzantine ticketing system, fares
Uh,
system. If
and
you
and
just said private sector, it's your job to sell the bonkers things that we come up with, That doesn't seem very fair.
I know, but I'm just thinking, and I'm not saying we know the answer, but why? Why does it have to be the way it's always been? Why do they have to behave in that way? I mean, why do they have to offer all those tickets? And I know this is always a really bad example, but on a basic level, everybody understands, airline fares are according to demand and supply, and the nearer you get to the time, the more expensive they get. So
Yes, actually,
why?
if you do get on a plane, you pay a different fare class, and they're all communicated differently, so that you only ever see the fare you're paying. But there are lots and lots of different fare classes for the
And
same seat.
there's lots and lots of different retailers and consolidators in the market as well.
Yeah. So
So you
but if, on this one, I am an advocate for making sure that it is open to a variety of retailers who can package it up in a different way to make it easier for their own customer base. Some people just want a simple fare, and some people want a complicated fare that achieves what they want. And some people want, I don't know, special fares. But yes,
I
private
guess that's the thing is,
retailers
I mean,
would
like,
be able to respond.
going forward, I mean, like, what would you'd have, I mean, like, do we think it would be good to have GBR,
But I
ticketing,
think there's a
Trainline, and all the other, third parties, TrainPal, whatever, would it be a good idea to move away from different individual operator ticket retailing?
I think as long as you've got the variety of different types of tickets, it helps to have a variety of different type of retailers. Unless you're just going to have standard, very simple fares, then
I think
you
it'd be
always need different people to package it up.
I think it'd be interesting to hear other people's views on that, and for some of our members to maybe give us case studies on the benefits of doing it one way or another way. I think it would be really interesting to hear if part of our response that we could put some case studies in about other markets and the way they do it, because I think we are a bit more complex than maybe other countries, and they don't have sort of like different operators. It is just single operator, and whether that's a good or a bad thing.
Yes, but yeah, I mean the one thing I've noticed recently is flexibility on fixed tickets. Uh, is locking in a journey in advance, but then having some flexibility over actually what time the journey is or the route you take. And that seems to have been a product that's responded to consumer demand. I don't know if you had just a standard national system, whether they would respond to consumer demand.
But that product that has been introduced has actually just increased the fare on the route for a lot of people. So it's actually, so while it's given a bit more flexibility, it's actually reduced the availability of advanced products, but also made the standard product more expensive.
Yes. Well, this would then come to go loop back to a previous question. If it gets too expensive, then people will moan, politicians will get excited about it, and someone will then have to make a change.
That as ever ticking that as ever ticketing is always a controversial one. So say we'd be interested to hear what our members think about that and what they think about, how we improve the rail market, the ticketing market. So I'd be interested to hear that.
My personal observation at the event I'm at is there are still a lot of people selling physical things for you to check, sell, or validate tickets. And it's surprising me that they're still obviously thinking that procurement is going to require physical things for a long, long time to come.
Well, I think
When,
it is being asked for.
well, yeah, which is a surprise considering, I don't know, you can go to Uniqlo and you just wave your clothes past a machine and it knows how much you got.
We
I mean,
should
you
put
pay for
that
it
in
with
the
your phone.
response. We should put that in the response that rail is not keeping up with other retail sectors, and can we learn from them?
Yes, we can learn from them. You're writing a response as committed and published last week, therefore
Wow.
I'm just telling you.
So I will look up a Uniqlo case study.
Or Daddy, go buy yourself a scarf.
I can't remember the last time I went to Uniqlo. I'll have to make a special trip because we don't have one in Pitlochry.
Oh, that's what happens when you live up there.
I know, we don't have anything there. We
Right.
save lots of money by living in the sticks. So, before we sort of like finish up, I mean, I think like to sort of like cover how to create how to craft a good response to a consultation. Yeah. And what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I was actually impressed when I saw this in your little note that you sent me beforehand because I was, um, it's something that people may not be aware of because obviously someone's got to read these. And so if you actually want your voice to be heard, you have to make it quick and snappy so they can add it to their waiting.
Absolutely.
Same as a bid response.
Well, I think the thing about it is you don't have to respond to every question. I mean, I think that's why, sort of like, in our discussion today, I've just picked out a couple. So you don't have to. So just think about the ones that are relevant to you. I mean, so, and the other thing is, so once you sort of like thought about what ones you think you can have the most impact on is, as Liam says, a bit like a bud response, brevity is key. So be clear, be direct, make it constructive. So not just, not say, well, this is bad. Be positive, provide evidence. Use of case studies and real world examples is a good idea. Be solutions focused. So whilst you might say, well, this is a challenge now, but we think this is the future. And if you can back that up with evidence, all the better. And the best thing is, if we respond collectively, we actually get heard better. So I think this is very much, for anybody that's in our community and particularly for our members, when we have our members call next week, then anything that you send to us that you think we can put into our response will be really useful. We can demonstrate um, our members' voices and we will get heard more. So I think that's the really important thing.
What are your key things that you want to write in a response?
So I think the big thing I want to put in is about, that we must make sure in the strategy that there's clear innovation pathways, that we have clear procurement routes, and that isn't just thought of as an afterthought, that we actually embed it within the reform process now. And I think, if we can share as many of our members' insights and challenges as possible, then we'll get a bigger voice at the table and we'll be able to proactively engage within the consultation. And I think, yeah, I mean, we've brought out a few topics this afternoon because we know that we have members involved in ticketing and who actively go through procurements. So think about that. And I think also, and I know one particular member will thank me for this, is that we probably want to think a lot more about AI within our response as well, and about what that means for the future of rail and what that means for how we can deliver better to the passenger, but also how we can make it a more cost-effective railway. And maybe you can think about some of the things that have been talked about with ticketing and data and stuff like that.
Yes, I mean, there's a role for there for packaging tickets. So I know we're just summing up, but there is a role there for packaging tickets, products, responding to consumer expectations, but then also the actual transaction flow, which I think quite quickly will move away from people buying tickets from operators to people making journeys and some system dealing with it for them. The new retailing needs to be flexible enough to accommodate those changes going forward.
So I think final message, you need to
Uh,
make your voices heard, get involved in
yeah.
consultation. If you want to become part of the Rail Innovation Group response, join.
Join,
You can
yes.
be part of the group. And we have a meeting next week, so you can be part of that meeting. Not too late to join in time for that meeting. And together we can all have a stronger voice.
Yes. Strong voice, loud, advocating for needs of startups. And truly, if government wants to engage with startups and push more money down to the bottom, the lower ends of the supply chain, this is a concrete example of how they can make it easier. Startups.
So that's the end of this week. What are we going to be talking about next week?
probably what's happened at our launch event, which is happening tomorrow, 6th of March, which this podcast will go out hopefully before that event, but we'll be talking about the event. And
And what's the event about?
it's called Skills Beyond Scale. So it's going to be our report on what exciting skills and products our members are developing, all to be next week.
Look forward to hearing all about it.
I look forward to having the event because then I can relax afterwards. All right. Next time.
Till next time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe, share, and get involved.
Thanks for listening to another episode of What Moves Us. We hope we moved you. For more episodes, you'll definitely want to subscribe to our channel.
Till next time.